I got it.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
We're in the cloud. Perfect. Okay, cool. So yeah, welcome to the last workshop. This is going to be about a bunch of third-party apps and content that you can use in your teaching. And we're going to start out by talking a little bit about using podcasts. So let me see. Okay, let me share my slides with you. Okay. So what we're usually doing, of course, when we're teaching is we're assigning readings to people that they're expected to do and use as a basis for a discussion. But one thing that can be pretty fun in both remote and also in-person classes is to use podcasts as an alternative medium. And you wouldn't use these to play during class, but they would just be an addition to or to supplement a reading I would assign. And broadly speaking, we can think of podcasts as coming in two categories. First of all, there are podcasts that are explicitly about philosophy, and they would explain some philosophical view, or they would analyze an issue from a philosophical perspective, or maybe have an interview with a philosopher focused on some kind of topic. And then there are also non-philosophy podcasts that give detailed information about a topic, or that give some interesting cases or stories to which students could themselves apply philosophical analysis. Right, as with any other medium, your students will be more likely to listen to the podcast if they're asked to do an assignment that relates to it somehow, for example, a quiz or a reflection piece. I think when it comes to length, it's okay to assign something that's a little bit longer, because professionally produced podcasts are usually pretty high quality and designed to keep people's attention. And I found that it's okay to assign students like a 30-minute podcast see a segment, or even something up to an hour. If it's entertaining enough, they'll usually listen to it, especially if it's combined with some kind of assignment. And it's maybe not surprising that we can get people to listen to longer segments of professionally produced podcasts than to our own lecture recordings. Of course, one question to ask yourself is, how accessible is this going to be? Because students with hearing impairments or non-native English speakers might have some trouble with podcasts. So one thing that's good to have is a written transcript. Many podcasts actually have this on their website, so you should just check. For example, this Radiolab episode that I'm going to talk about in a bit that I assign, the whole podcast is just transcribed. And so I point this out to students when I assign it so that they can read along if they want, or just if they find this section hard to understand, they can just look up what the person said, so that can be very useful. So just see what's available and see what your students need, but especially if you have students in your class where maybe that their English isn't so great, or that they actually have a disability accommodation for hearing impairment, this is something to be very mindful of. Now, here are some examples for how I've used this. So when I teach critical thinking, I often assign an episode from the podcast This American Life that's called Kid Logic. And in this episode, basically it's just a lot of cute little stories about how children reason in these wacky ways. And what I ask students to do is to reconstruct and analyze the arguments that the children make to answer the question of whether the children use a different logic in their reasoning than adults, because the episode sort of suggests that, right? So kids use a different logic, but what the students usually find out at the end is that the reasoning patterns that the kids are using are the same as adults would use. It's just that because they lack knowledge, they are just willing to supply some wacky premises that then lead them to kind of strange conclusions. But this is a huge hit. Every time I use this, the students are really into it. So I can highly recommend this. Another one that works well for teaching critical thinking is another episode of This American Life. It's called Fear and Loathing in Homer and Rockwell. And there's this guy who uses internet research about the refugee crisis in Europe to figure out how to vote on this sanctuary city proposal that's up for debate in his town. And the sort of twist is that this is like this the absolute most remote town in Alaska. And as far as people know there, no immigrants have ever gone there, but somehow this sanctuary city debate is still like a really hot topic. And what students can do with this episode is they can evaluate the man's arguments and the research methods that he uses for gathering information. And this is a really good way for them to think about a real life example of inductive reasoning or analogical reasoning, and also research methods. Then another thing I often teach in critical thinking is basic concepts about the scientific method and the replication crisis. You might have heard that the replication crisis has affected big parts of, for example, social psychology, that very famous experiments just fail to replicate. And one strand of research that has been affected by this is the research about stereotype threat. So this idea that if, for example, it's made salient to you that you're a woman before you're taking a math test, then you would activate the stereotype that women are bad at math, and it would make you nervous, and it would make you perform worse on the test. And this phenomenon was initially thought to be very important, potentially in helping minorities gain better outcomes in education, but then there were a lot of replication failures later. And this podcast is really cool because it interviews the two most prominent people who actually started the research on this topic. And one of them is really bothered by these replication failures, and the other one not so much. So it's a really cool thing to see how they kind of debate that. For teaching introductory epistemology and giving some background on analyses of knowledge in both Western philosophy and non-Western philosophy, I've often assigned an episode of the podcast Philosophy Bites. And this is an episode with Jennifer Nagel on intuitions about knowledge. And she has some really cool parts in there where she talks about how Gettier cases were basically already known in ancient Indian philosophy. And one thing I like about using podcasts also is that it can really meaningfully diversify your syllabus, because, right, sometimes, you know, you assign a paper, say by a woman, and then the students write about it and it's just like he the whole way through, right? But actually introducing people's voices, I think, makes it kind of more real that, you know, very different people can do philosophy. So yeah, so I think that's kind of a nice added bonus of introducing podcasts. So here's a list of podcasts about philosophy specifically, so from this first category. And I also gave you a link here to a list that has a lot of them, but I think those are ones that I know are, you know, done by philosophers and that are quite high quality. Some of the other ones on this list, I wasn't entirely sure what their provenance was, but the ones on here I can definitely recommend. And then for non-philosophy podcasts, of course, there's just like a vast landscape out there. Ones that you might consider are This American Life and Radiolab. This American Life usually has like stories that can be used just sort of to apply certain philosophical concepts, or just to have like a case basis for a discussion. Yeah, Radiolab, similarly, sort of like long form analyses about particular phenomena. I recently got into You're Wrong About, which often analyzes certain historical events or phenomena in ways that kind of shows how the public had kind of a wrong impression of what was actually going on with that phenomenon. And it's quite in depth, and I find it very entertaining. So you might find topics there that integrate with certain things you're teaching. Then On Being is a very famous NPR show that has more sort of spiritual content that could work for certain lessons. The Moth has just people telling stories. There's just like a lot in there, but some of the stories might relate to things you might want to cover, for example, in an ethics course or so. And then Judge John Hodgman is kind of like a humorous show where he settles disputes between people about sometimes relatively trivial matters. But again, depending on what you're teaching, maybe in an interethics class, there could be something funny in there. But right, I mean, there's so much out there, and you know, it's probably the easiest if you're already kind of a podcast person to just, when you listen to your favorite podcast, just to kind of you know, keep an eye out for things that might work for teaching and just sort of make yourself a note. That's kind of how I find the ones that I'm using. So, but that's just a few ideas here that you might pick up. Okay, so that's what I've got on podcasts. Any questions? If not, we're gonna give it over to Zach for talking about some third-party video content.
Yeah, I'll talk about a couple video stuff here. So we'll start off just kind of like the ideas of like what you can use videos for. I think the most obvious one is you can kind of use them like podcasts in addition to or instead of a reading. So if you wanted to do that, see the earlier stuff that Julia's talked about with podcasts for ideas on using them. So, you know, incentivizing them with some kind of short assignment or something like that. If the videos are longer, like 30 minutes or whatever, you could use play pause it with those videos so that you could have quizzes that they do while they're working through it. So that's a cool integration you could use. But of course with videos too, you can also introduce them in your lectures or include them in your lectures if they're like kind of short videos. So one of the ones that I use is I like John Corvino's Better Argument series on YouTube. These are like kind of critical thinking videos. So he talks about logical fallacies a bit, but also validity, things like the fact-opinion distinction. And so you could, you know, incorporate these into your lectures, like we've been kind of throwing some videos in here and there. One thing to note is when you're recording, when we were kind of seeing, can you record your lecture and will it keep the video in it? So if a student, you know, wants to watch some recorded lecture, would they be able to access the video? And we noticed that with Netflix, we didn't have any problems. So the next Netflix video did record, but I remembered that I tried to do this with Hulu and The Good Place in spring, and it wouldn't record the video. So try that on your own if you're going to incorporate them in some kind of format where you're recording it on Zoom. You can also use, you know, the videos as lectures, like in a discussion group. So they could watch a short video and do some activity, like have a discussion, write some kind of assignment, do some kind of presentation or something like that. But as we talked about earlier, don't rely too much on other people's videos. Like you don't want to be seen as lazy, and you want to be doing the work. So students might look badly at you if you you know, rely too much on other people's recorded content. One thing to remember, and we talked about this yesterday in the Zoom section, if you're sharing your screen and you have a video that you're going to show, by default, it will not play the audio for the students. So here's the screen sharing thing, like, you know, I'm going to share my screen, and you have to come down to this lower left-hand corner of it to click that you're going to share the computer sound. So make sure you click that when you're doing this. So one thing that kind of that I've seen here is this big spreadsheet that Liz Jackson and Tyron Goldschmidt made. They created this, I think it was just kind of right in the beginning of the transfer to remote teaching in the spring. And it has a lot of really good recorded philosophy classes and lectures. It's a Google Docs spreadsheet, so you can add more if you have them, and you can check them out there at that link. You can also download the spreadsheet and then search through it and everything. But one thing to kind of be cautious about is a lot of these are longer. They're about an hour. So if you decide to use one, try to use like smaller clips of something if you can. And if you wanted to use something that's longer, don't do that too much and use something like play pause it. So here's just a screenshot of the spreadsheet after I downloaded it. You know, I decided to search for, you know, meta ethics, and I found this video with David Enoch and Mark Schroeder talking about meta ethics and moral realism. Now this video is an hour long and it's them talking to each other. So you probably wouldn't want to use this entire thing, but if there's a certain aspect that you want to talk about in your class, you could pull a small clip out from it. So I want to just talk about some other video resources. So there's Wireless Philosophy. This has a big collection of a lot of different short videos hosted by other philosophers. So Tom Doherty talks about consent. And their resources page also has stuff with more videos and podcasts and stuff like that. I mentioned this, The Better Argument by John Corvino. Each one of these videos is somewhere between 2.5 to 5 minutes, so they're pretty short. And a lot of the topics are, about arguments and how to make better arguments. So this would be really good for a critical thinking class. This other one keeps popping up whenever I was trying to learn about other kinds of video things to use. That's the Crash Course Philosophy YouTube channel. These videos are about 10 minutes each, and they go through just various topics, so you can check those out too. And then here's one of the websites that has a lot of different resources and links to videos as well. I also just kind of searched videos on Daily News to see some things, and I found a couple cool ones that I wanted to share with you. So there was a Daily News post about funny examples of logical fallacies in, TV shows or movies and stuff. And so this was kind of crowdsourced, and a bunch of people posted things. So if you're doing fallacies, you might want to look at that and see if you can find any of those fun clips to use. There's something that's kind of new and topical. So if you're doing something in applied ethics and you want to talk about coronavirus, this is a series of videos that are 10 to 20 minutes each. It's philosophers at York University, and they talk about things like pandemics, public policy, ethics of social distancing, and stuff like that. And then, because the good place is something that students, most of our students know it, and they kind of get into philosophy with it. Todd May, who is a philosopher who consulted on it, he has 4 short videos that you can access here in his YouTube channel. And they're about 4 minutes. They're very basic, but talking about like utilitarianism or deontology. So you might consider including some of these. Okay, so that's all that I have on videos. One thing that I thought we could do, if you have any video resources that you really like, you could drop those in the chat and we can share them later. Good, Mariella has done that too. Already put something here. Awesome. Yeah, if you have some video resources that you tend to like to use, I often use things, like I showed the clip from Community or some TV show that I watch, and I find them and kind of try to keep a list, but I'm not super diligent. But if you have any questions, we can talk. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Julia.
No, I sometimes use the Khan Academy videos if I need to like illustrate some kind of maybe scientific concept that's background knowledge really quickly. So like they have this nice like 3-minute video on how natural selection works that I usually play when we talk about design arguments. And it's just like super cute and catchy, and I don't really need to explain it. So I like to just drop in some of their stuff sometimes, but it's not so much philosophy. It's more like if you need some kind of background information that they need to know about.
Cool. Okay, so we don't have any questions or anyone want us sharing anything. We can move on to Julia's next segment.
Alrighty.
Doing Perusall, right?
I think that's right. Yes.
Cool.
Okay. So Perusall is a software that basically is a markup software to mark up and put notes into texts. What makes it interesting is that students can collaborate in marking up texts and answering questions about it. And also you can integrate it into your Canvas gradebook. So for example, you can have students be graded for interacting with a text that you want them to read. And so it can correspond with the gradebook, and just like similar to Playposit earlier, it's just one of these third-party integrations that function quite nicely with Canvas. So this is very similar to how it worked with Playposit. What you want to do is you want to go into Canvas and start creating an assignment. This is just the scroll down menu here that I get when I'm creating a new assignment. And again, what I want to do is I want to say, use an external tool for the submission. And I put in Perusall for my external tool. So then I select this because it pops up from my search. One thing that's maybe a little bit counterintuitive is that for it to dump you into the Perusall menu, you actually have to save the assignment. You don't just save the assignment at the end, you save it now, and then it kind of gets you into the Perusall menu. it looks like this. You've saved the assignment, and then you just click here on load Perusall assignment number 1 in a new window, and that's when you actually go to create it. So what this then brings you to is this Perusall site. And one thing that's kind of nice is then that when you log in for the first time, it wants to give you a little tour. And this little tour is actually pretty useful. So it will show me that I can put my course materials here in this library, and it highlights some of the functions that are in this side navigation menu here. So one thing that's kind of important, and I'll talk a little bit about it later, is the settings and the gradebook, because the Perusall ideas about how it should auto-grade your students' contributions seem sometimes a little bit, I don't know, arcane. Yeah, they're fancy. So you can also have this student view button here, so you can see what your assignment looks like from the student perspective, and a few other features that you can explore. Okay, so, well, let's create an assignment and see what it looks like. We're going to the library and we want to add some content. So I just uploaded a PDF from my computer from a journal article that I sometimes assign in my epistemology class. So it gets uploaded, and then what I have to choose first is whether I want to assign the entire paper or if I want to assign just a part of the paper. So I can also just assign page ranges if I want to. So that can sometimes be useful if, for example, you want students to read a text in several chunks, for example. Okay, so we're saying assign the whole thing. You can now name the assignments. You can set your submission deadline, and you can give the students instructions. Now it says optional, add instructions for students. I don't think this should be optional, because the grading feature, if you use the auto grading, will make specific assumptions about what the student has to do to earn full credit. For example, as far as I could tell, the default was that the student had to make sort of like 7 interactions with the text to qualify for getting full credit. And of course, if that's required to get full credit, the students would have to know that, right? So you need to make sure that in your instructions for the students, you explain to them very carefully how the grading is set up so they know how to interact with it in such a way that they can get full credit. Okay, so, oopsie. So now we have a few more options here, right? So annotations to grade. Here it says use course settings 7, right? So this says, yeah, they have to do 7 annotations to be able to get full credit. The course default can be changed in your course settings. So again, familiarize yourself in the course settings with the grading assumptions that the software is making, so you know what you're actually asking the students to do. Yeah, you can choose when it should be visible. You can assign it to specific students. If you want, you can have students post their comments anonymously, although you would still know who said what. It would just be anonymous between the students. You can make it optional, which means that it wouldn't be graded. Okay, so now we've created it. So you see here, this is my text, Modest A Priori Knowledge by Donna Summerfield. Now, if we open it, this is what it would look like. So you have the text here in the middle, and then students can highlight parts of the text. So for example, here I highlighted the headline, and then I put in a question. Why do you think that Summerfield calls her theory a theory of a priori knowledge that is modest? And now a student could respond to that question. They can also add hashtags. They can mention a friend if they want to. They have some options here for how to edit their comments. But the basic idea is just that when they read the text, they can kind of go through, they can highlight things, and they can have a conversation with other people about what's happening here. So somebody could, ask a question like, oh, I don't understand what the sentence means, and then somebody else could answer it. Here's another one, right? So I just highlighted the word defeasible and said, what does defeasible mean? And then when you look at the far right here in this sidebar menu, there's also this second item here, which is this like double speech bubble item. When you click on that, you can see all of the interactions with the text that have been made. And then one more thing that's kind of interesting is that there's also a note-taking feature that is private to the students. So if the students want to, put in comments that are for their grade, they can do that, but then maybe they want to annotate the text just for themselves in a way that other people can't see and that aren't part of their grade. And then this would be the function by which they do that. And as always, right, if you wanted your students to use this, make sure you explain some of these functionalities to them and what it means to use them, either by showing them a little tutorial video or by doing a little tour yourself where you highlight the features that you want them to use. One thing that's kind of nice, here we're in the settings menu. You can see there's also scoring options, but for grouping, if you have a big class and you want them to annotate a text, maybe you don't want all of them to work on the same document because that could get pretty messy. So you might say, okay, I'm only going to have like 2 or 3 students work on the text at the same time. So you can either manually assign students to groups, or you can also have this done automatically where you just tell Perusall how big you want your groups to be. And this is kind of similar to the idea that we talked about in discussion boards, where you just have little groups that interact with each other, but not with the other groups. So that might be useful. As I said, right, the scoring is something to pay attention to here. It says Perusall scoring is based on up to 6 components, each of which has a target value from 0 to 100. And I think it might try to automatically figure out how high quality your students' comments are, right? So for example, here, annotation content score target based on Perusall's annotation quality algorithm. I'm not entirely sure what that algorithm does. So if you're going to use this and you're going to use it to grade students, you might want to, look a little bit more here in the Learn More option to see what students need to do to be scored highly by this algorithm. So you can explain that to them. And again, here's where you can change how many annotations they actually have to submit to get full credit, right? So again, see our knowledge base for more information on scoring. So you probably want to look into that somewhat carefully before you use this to actually assign grades to students. But again, right, in a way, this is kind of nice because it holds students accountable for actually engaging with the text. And it also makes cheating a little bit harder, right? Because they can't just copy some quiz answers, but they actually have to go in and put in their own annotations and things like that. I mean, I think in principle, they could cheat by like saying, oh, what did, my friend highlight and what comment did my friend make? But again, I think it sort of disincentivizes cheating by making it more difficult. Okay, so that's what I have on Perusall. And now we can see if anybody has any questions. Oh yeah, one more thing to note maybe is that you can use this, of course, for student homework, and you could even make groups of 1 person each, right? So if you wanted to just, each student annotates their own text and you just like grade that to see that they read it, you could do that. Or if you wanted students to work on a piece of text in class together, what you could do, right, is you could tell them, hey, you all log into this now at the same time and kind of work this out kind of by combining it, for example, with breakout groups, right? So there's a way to do that as well. So yeah, lots of things you can do with that. The thing I'm just a little nervous about is the grading, because I haven't like done a deep dive into like what their algorithm. Oh, good. Zach found a PDF with the scoring stuff on Perusall. But so just so that you know, like if you assign that, you just need to familiarize yourself with that to make sure it grades it in a way that you're happy with. Perfect. Thank you, Zach. All right, so then maybe should we move to Piazza? You're muted, Zach.
Yes, let's go to Piazza. Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, so Piazza is another platform that integrates with Canvas, and it's a free platform, so students don't have to pay anything, and it's good, they say, for managing questions and answers. So that's kind of the primary thing. What happens in Piazza, where are you? There we are. Students can post questions on it. You can have things sorted in different folders and everything, and I'll show you kind of how that works. But students can post questions. They can collaborate together to answer questions and create polls, and they can do all of this anonymously if you allow. So they have the option to either make their posts associated with their name. They can make it anonymous to students, so the other students don't see their name, but you as the instructor do. Or if you want, they can make it anonymous to other students and the instructor. So you can stop them from doing this latter one, right? So you can make it so they don't have this option. But it's nice because they can be anonymous to other students, which students seem to like sometimes. As the instructor, you can answer the questions. One really cool feature is that you can endorse student questions and answers. So if students are working, like one student asks a question and another student answers it well, and like that's what you want it to say, you can endorse that answer and basically say like, yep, the instructor approves of this. So other students can see this then, and that's kind of cool. And as the instructor, you can also edit or delete any of the content that is posted there. As we mentioned, this is integrated with Canvas. So for example, with the navigation, we talked about that yesterday. Julia went over how to do this. But as you can see, you can bring Piazza into the navigation bar so students can access it very easily. The main use that they suggest using Piazza for is to replace your discussion board entirely. One thing that might tell against this is that Canvas discussion boards are really easy to use for groups. And it's really easy to grade Canvas discussion boards. Now, on the other hand, Piazza does integrate with the Canvas assignments as an external tool. I actually saw it on Julia's past slide when she was showing how you can put Perusall into an assignment. Piazza is right underneath it. I tried to play around with this a little bit. Didn't have too much luck, but I haven't done a huge deep dive into it. So I'm going to be looking into how the Piazza interface with Canvas works next week with one of these learning tech consultants. If you're teaching hybrid, in-person or remote, so we were talking about this with recording in class lectures, and I mentioned this a bit, you could have students like commenting in the chat and sending you private messages, and they can talk to you or talk amongst themselves while you're in person. But also, if you're doing this hybrid in-person remote, you could use Piazza as the area where they post questions and answers during your in-person class session. So the students who are remote could use this as kind of like a discussion board, so they can ask questions like, wait, what was Zach talking about there? Like, I didn't really understand this part of the argument, and another student can answer it. And then later you could go back and kind of see what they said, fill in some answers for them, or like endorse what they've said, what their answers are, and say like, yep, good, like you all figured it out. One of the primary things that I'm looking at doing this for is to use this as a muddiest points assignment. So if you know muddiest points, basically students tell you or take a little bit of time and identify what they're confused about from the lecture or the week's lecture. And I like to use these to kind of like see if there are any common things that they're confused about. So I think you can kind of do an online version of it with this, where students can anonymously post something that they're confused about regarding a lecture or the week's material. And then they need to construct some reply to other students to try to explain and figure out like, yeah, here, I can help you and like help you with your understanding here. And then, you know, as the instructor, you can go through these and give feedback. So you can just endorse answers that people already said. You can answer them. You could choose to incorporate this into your next lecture or whatever. So these are some of the uses that you can like use Piazza to do. And I just want to walk through it with you after introducing this. So to create your Piazza course, they say that it takes 2 minutes. I didn't time myself when I did it earlier. I think it's somewhere around this. So it doesn't take too much time. And you can follow these directions later if you want to. They walk you through it very nicely. After you've created your course, you'll see this. So now I have, like, you know, the course that I've created. And to go to my classes, I go up to the button that says go to my classes. Now, after I click on that, this is where it brings me. So this is what the main page looks like. Now, mind you, I haven't used this with a class yet. So, and my class hasn't started. So there's no student posts or things like that. I'll show you some screenshots of an actual class so you can get a feel for what that looks like. But what I just want to highlight here is that when you sign in, they have these videos that you can watch to get yourself started. I really like this one. So they have a nice intro for students and how the students can set up their course and like kind of how it works. And so that's something that I'll be sharing with my students. Similarly, you can see that they do this kind of like demo thing every Monday through Friday at certain times. So I think I'm going to be going to this before my classes start in August next week. Well, I'll go to it next week before my classes start in August. Now, when you log in, and I'll show you a sample class, but they don't have this in it. When you log in, you're going to get this screen, and then you'll close this, right? And you can see like how many unread posts are there, like how many posts haven't you read, how many unanswered questions are there, and how many unresolved follow-ups. So you get some kind of data when you log in. So I've gone to the settings here. Sorry, I'll go back. So I went to manage class to get to my settings. And I just want to show you the setting. So here's the posting anonymously one. So I have it disabled, which means that students can show up anonymous. They can to their classmates, but not to the instructors. So I'll be able to see who's saying what, but they can be anonymous with their other classmates just in case they feel embarrassed about something. There's a lot of other settings that you can play with as well here. Okay, so here's a nice graphic to kind of show you what some of these different symbols mean. So, you know, when you look at this for the first time, it looks somewhat overwhelming. You have all these numbers, different colors and letters and all this stuff, but it's actually a pretty easy system. So you can put a note on something. So notes are ungraded things, and students can just see what they say. So you can give some kind of instructions and things like that there. These numbers refer to how many updates are since you've last looked at it. So it gives you a very easy way of kind of figuring out when you're logging in, what do you need to look at that's new. The orange eye here means that the instructor has answered, and so students will be able to see that if an instructor has answered something. And the S means that a student answer has been posted, so the students have posted some answer. If the instructor endorses it, then you get a little check on it, so they can see that the instructor has looked at their answer and said, yes, that's a good answer to this question. Okay, once again, my class starts in August, so my page doesn't do a good job at showing what Piazza looks like. But one cool thing is on their website, they have a sample class that you can browse through. When I was doing this, it made me log in, so you might need to set an account to do it first. And also, it's a calculus class, so, you know, just be prepared to see lots of math stuff. So to view this real class, or view the sample class, go to piazza.com and come down here to the view a real class. Once again, it might make you log in or sign up before you can do that. Now here I am logged in. I have something in my upper right-hand corner. And so I've gone to their sample class here. What I want to highlight is there's this little settings wheel up here. It comes with the tooltips turned on. Tooltips just basically is their kind of like help guide. So you don't have to turn them off. I just wanted to highlight that because when you're clicking through it, it's going to like, things are going to pop up explaining stuff to you. And you can turn those off if you want. Okay, let's look at a few of these. So here I've circled, this is what the overall board kind of looks like. So you can see that you can have some pinned posts if you want, and it divides things by week. And you can scroll up and down here to look at different ones. Once again, the S signifies that a student has posted an answer, so you have student answers there, and the I shows that an instructor has done this as well. So in this kind of bar where you're getting through the different discussion board, you can click on the settings thing and you can filter to whatever you want. So this is kind of nice because if you're trying to grade and see what students have done and you haven't, read the new assignments, you can just look at all the unread ones, or you can look at all the ones that are updated, and so on and so forth. So this is what it looks like if you tried to do a new post. So I started a new post here, and you have different options for what your post will look like. I'm not sure if you can control subsections, at least in this sample course, I would have to post the entire class, but you can also choose which folder you want it to be in. These folders are up here, so you can see that homework 1 that they have, the discussion on that has 21 questions, homework 2 has 5, and so on and so forth. So you can choose which folder your post will be associated with. And then you put your summary and like make your post and your question or whatever you want to do. Down here is where you can show what your name is. So this is where students and you can post, well, students, I'm not sure if you can, but students can choose to be anonymous if they want. And once again, you can allow them to be anonymous to you as the instructor or just anonymous to other students. Okay, one feature that I think is pretty cool, and you do not get this with Canvas, is you have the ability to search posts very easily right here. So if there are certain keywords or certain things that you're looking for, you can type this in and then it'll automatically repopulate this whole thing to show you posts that have those terms in it. So that's kind of cool. One other thing to show, so one thing you'll notice here is we have the question and then the instructors have an answer and the students have an answer. So students don't make individual posts. There's one collective student's answer. So a student will have an answer and then another student can edit that or add something a line down. Piazza recommends that you have students add their new answers a line down, but you might worry that, well, how can you tell what student has done what? Well, this circled bar here, the question history, is how you can use that. So when you first click on some post, it'll bring you to the, up to date. And so you see what the student's answer is and the instructor's answer here. But if we want to see like who said what and when did they do that, you click back and you can go back in time to see what the answers looked like originally. So here was the first student's answer when they put it, and you can see it says upgrade or updated, well, this is 8 years ago, right? By somebody, anonymous scale. Then you can keep going through this and see how the answers have changed and moved, and it lets you know who's been doing this as well. So you can see how it's changed. Students have kind of worked on it more. And so on and so forth. So you can go through the question history and see what people have done. Also, one of the features that I like about this is the ability for the instructor to endorse the answer. So if you're an instructor and you're doing this and you see, okay, here's this question, here's what the student said to suggest it, you can then endorse the answer and say, yep, you're on the right track, this is what you should do. And this can give really easy feedback without having to write lots of emails or do stuff like that. So that's kind of just a brief, quick look at Piazza. Here are some resources that I found particularly good. These first two ones are in that kind of like, you can find them directly on the Piazza website, but here are those videos. And then here are two instructors who've gone through and done kind of like a course tour to show you how it works. So those are also pretty nice. There are also these two guides here. So Piazza has their website guide. And here's just a nice quick, snappy PDF of everything. And to remind you once again, Piazza is something that CU integrates into Canvas and uses. So you can request training from the learning technology consultants with these links here too. Okay, that's what I have on Piazza. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah, Mitzi.
Uh, so, well, I don't know how to use Canvas discussion board very well either, and I've never tried Piazza. So what are some of the reasons why one should go for Piazza as opposed to Canvas discussion board? I mean, I think you kind of hinted at it, but if you could just quickly say.
Yeah, I think the ability to endorse answers is kind of neat, so you don't have to like write replies. And once again, it might not be hard to write replies in Canvas's discussion board, but you might be saying the kind of same thing, like, yeah, good job, or something like that. And this gives you one centralized place where you can do it so that all students can see. And endorsing makes it easy. The other thing that I like about this is like with the discussion boards, depending on how you're using them, they can be like, students reply to each other. So you'll have these long reply chains where they're working stuff out. And with Piazza, there's that one student's answer. So they're kind of collaboratively working on it like a wiki. So this might be like a nice way for students to kind of work together and just kind of fill in each other's knowledge. So I think that that's kind of a really cool feature. So those are things I like about it. The other thing that I really do like is, once again, I like these muddiest point assignments where students are like identifying what they're confused about and seeing like, are students kind of confused about the same thing? Well, that's something I should talk about more. And with Piazza, you can have students submitting this anonymously. With the discussion boards, you can't have them do that. So ultimately, the reason I got interested is because I do these muddiest point things in person. And I was thinking, how can I keep doing this when I'm online? And so I think that this is the best technology to do that.
So it sounds like, I mean, because I think that my kids' high school math teachers use Piazza as a kind of peer sort of self-help thing. And so it sounds as though Piazza is really good for having students kind of work through questions either posed by you or by them. Would it work as well if you were using your discussion board more for just pure discussion, like, what do you think about this, etc.? I mean, then in that case, if they're collaborating on a single answer, that would be a little odd.
Yeah.
If what you were trying to do was to encourage like debate, like having them take sides or whatever.
Right. So I think that's exactly a way of where you could separate these technologies and use discussion boards for one thing where they're like debating or taking sides and giving reasons on that. And then Piazza could be kind of a more review, like answering certain questions that, you're asking or posing them about the readings. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. And I do want to plug, if you go back to our first one on Canvas, I talk a lot about discussion boards and how to set them up and stuff you can do with them.
Yeah, I also remember that you mentioned when we talked about the discussion boards that it's really easy to grade people's contributions in the speed grader if you use Canvas's discussion boards. But it seems like here, where you have to slide back and forth to see who edited which answer when, if you wanted this to be for a grade, it seems like it could get a little tedious to try to identify who did what and to score them on that. So it seems like it might be more useful for like something where you don't need to grade individual contributions very carefully.
Absolutely. And, when I was showing with the sliding thing, this is on their website. Now, I'm not sure how it works with as an external tool in Canvas. So integrating it in Canvas with the external tool, maybe then you can do it in SpeedGrader and go through things. But that's what I'm going to try to figure out next week to see if that works. If it doesn't, then I'd probably keep discussion boards for the graded thing. Yeah. All right.
All right, so maybe we'll go to the last thing, which is Flipgrid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so Flipgrid is the last third-party app that we're going to talk about, and also the one that, in trying to figure out how to make it work, was the one that gave me the biggest headache. And just to tell you kind of why it gave me a headache. So we've mentioned a bunch of tools that integrate into Canvas, right? Where you create an assignment in Canvas and then you say, okay, the input source is this external app, and then that kind of like leads you into this third-party website where you design your, play posit quiz or your Perusall text and annotation assignment or whatever. And in principle, this is supposed to be something that Flipgrid does as well, but apparently CU has not enabled this. But there were some pages that I found on CU's website that said it should be possible, so I played with it for a long time to try to make it possible, and then finally realized that it just wouldn't work. I have received some information from the Office of Information Technology since then, because I called them yesterday and was like, what's going on? So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this, but what I'm going to show you is how to just use it through their website in a way that doesn't integrate with Canvas, which is actually pretty easy. So once I figured out that I had to do it that way, it wasn't so much of a problem. But just so you know, this is one that, unless you do some special stuff I'm going to talk about later, you just operate this through their website and you give people links to your assignments. It does not feed straight into Canvas. So if you use this and if you want to grade it, you have to kind of manually go into the Canvas gradebook, create some assignment, and then you enter kind of like whatever they did on the Flipgrid website. The point of Flipgrid is that it's a platform that allows students to record short videos and interact with each other's video recordings. So if students like certain video-based social media sites like TikTok, they might find this pretty fun. So it's almost like a discussion board that's entirely video-based. So this is just a screenshot of what this interface might look like. So if a bunch of students had already posted a bunch of videos, they would show up with these little selfie screenshots. And if you wanted to add another video, you would press this big green plus button. But that's just sort of to give you a first impression of what this would look like. Now, Flipgrid is free, so what you can do if you want to use it is you just go to their website and you sign up for a free educator account, and you need to sign up with your school email. That's kind of important. So then you're signed in and you see this welcome screen, and you can start your first grid, where a grid is just one of these pages that has like a certain topic or that has a certain purpose that you want your students to go to post their videos to contribute to that discussion. So what you do is first is you name your grid. So you could say, personal introductions or reading responses on this particular text or something. And then you have to select how the students will join. And I think for CU students, the best thing to do is to tell it that they will join with their school email, because they all have a CU email address. And then you get a flip code, which is down here. And this is basically what you would share with your students so they can access it. So for example, if you wanted this to be an assignment, you could on Canvas copy and paste this link that students would click on, and that's how they would get access to this assignment. So then basically what you do when you select the school email option, you say, okay, at colorado.edu is what you would put in. And in that case, or if you have a different school, you would put at yourschool.edu, and that filters out that only people with a CU email and this little code link can contribute to this grid, right? So in my case here, this is what it looked like when I entered that. But then I actually had Brian do it, of course, because Brian also has a Colorado email address. So Brian could do this too. So as soon as you have the link and you have the right kind of email address, you could enter this. So in principle, this opens up the possibility that some student who's not in your class, who has a Colorado address and the link, could also participate in this grid, just as a security kind of warning, but maybe you think that's like not that big of a deal. Okay, so my grid is ready. Now, this is now a screenshot from the menu that I get as an educator. But what I might be more interested in right now is to see, well, what is this actually looking like from the student's perspective? I can also go down here to the left and look at what my individual students have contributed, but let's now view this as if we were a student. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a little video here where I'm interacting with it. Okay, so we're now here in our educator menu for Flipgrid, and now I'm going to show you what it looks like from the student's perspective to record a video. So to get to the student view, we actually just click here on this flip code. Now it will ask me to log in. I'm using Google with my CU email, so I'm going to click on that. And then here's my Colorado email, login successful. So this is then what it looks like if I was looking from the student perspective. So now we can see here that Brian has already recorded a short video, so we can watch that.
Hi, hello, hi.
Okay, so we could now record another video in response if we wanted to, but we are just going to make our own video. So we're going to click on this big green plus, allow the microphone, okay? So the video can now be up to 1 minute and 30 seconds long. So let's just do something short. Hello, I'm Julia, I'm new to Flipgrid. Okay. Hello, I'm Julia, I'm new to Flipgrid. Right, so we can say, hello, I'm Julia, I'm new to Flipgrid. Okay, so now we can say next. We're going to take a selfie. That's going to be the cover image of our video. So let's do that. Okay. Now we can add a title if we want, and we submit our video. Complete. And now you can see that it has been added. Hello, I'm Julia, I'm new to Flipgrid. Right, and you can see that you can ask your students to record their own videos. They can respond to each other's videos. So there are a lot of ways you can use that, and then you can make new grids for new assignments if you want to. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And what I didn't use when I was just recording this little short demo video were the various interesting filters and options that I can access. So you can see here some screenshots. I can pixelate myself. I can add a whole bunch of little emojis, like a little unicorn. I can overlay this with filters. So the students can get very creative here if they want to. So there's like a lot of fun stuff, and they can also actually use a whiteboard. So if they actually want to just draw something rather than record their face, that's also something that's possible. Then when you're back in this educator menu, right, so you can also just look at what individual students have contributed. There are various action items here too. So you can download things, you can delete things. So, you know, sort of the usual stuff that you would expect that you would have control over. Now, right, to make the grid accessible to your students, you need to share this link that has this little code in it. And then they need to know that they have to log in with their Colorado email. And there's a really nice short video demo that illustrates how Flipgrid works. I have a link to that a few slides ahead. Yeah, you want them to see that so they know what you're expecting them to do. And as I said, if you want to grade a Flipgrid assignment, you presumably would have to manually create an entry in the Canvas gradebook and say, this is an assignment with like an external submission. And then you would enter your grades like you would do for any other assignment that is not directly integrated into Canvas gradebook. Here are some things you might use it for. You could, for example, use it to replace a written discussion board. So if you wanted people to just record themselves, that's one way to do it. You could also give them options, right? So if you find that some students really want to do the Flipgrid thing, but some students prefer the written discussion board, maybe they could do either one of them. You could use this to personalize your class more and have students introduce themselves and record short videos about themselves. You could also use it for having students record short reading responses, perhaps. You could use it for assigning metacognitive reflection tasks or giving each other study tips. So for example, you know, if you had something like the muddiest point assignment, or, you know, you want the students to reflect on, you know, what their plan is for how to study for the exam or something, you could ask them to record that. You could also assign little mini presentations on something, like you could say, oh, everybody has to explain a certain concept or something like that. You could do that too. One thing I'm not really totally sure about is if students might be very shy, how they would feel about these kinds of assignments. We talked a lot about how we need to stop ourselves from recording these like over and over again because we're worried about them not being perfect. Our students, of course, are maybe in the same boat when they know that other people can see these recordings. Of course, there are like certain things they can play with, like the pixelation and things like that, and these kind of fun filters. So yeah, I think it's a really fun thing to do, but I think it might depend on, you know, who your students are, whether they find this fun or if they find this just more stressful. It definitely adds kind of a personal aspect that you don't necessarily get from just written interaction. So the way I showed you how to use this was without integrating into Canvas, right? Because as of yesterday, I was under the impression that it just wasn't possible to integrate it with Canvas. Now, I just heard back in the break from the Office of Information Technology. They emailed me and they said, hey, we can actually create a Canvas integration for you. So basically the way you do that is, once you have a Flipgrid educator account, there is a section, and I'll show you a screenshot where that is. There's an integrations section in your account, and then you select to add a new integration, and that generates a certain sort of passkey for your account. And then you would have to share this passkey with this person from OIT, and they would specifically install it for you as a third-party app in Canvas. And they would have to do it for every class. So if you really want this, and you really want it as a Canvas integration, rather than just something that you use through this third-party website by sharing the links, you can talk to OIT for making that happen for you custom for each course. Honestly, once I realized how easy it is to just share this little link with the students, I probably wouldn't bother. I would just like use it as the third party thing and not integrate it. But you know, you might as well if it was something you wanted to use a lot. So just so you know, it's not already set up for you as an integration like Piazza is, or Perusall or PlayPosit, which are already in Canvas, like right there for you to use. It's not there yet. So you have to talk to OIT to set that up for you if you want it. Okay, so yeah, and then I had, I think I had some, yeah, some resources here. Let me just reshare that real quick to show it to you. I went out here a little too fast. Okay, so you can see here, right, in my educator menu up in the top right corner, if I click on my name, there is this integrations menu. So that's where I would go in and create this code that I would share with the person from OIT so they can make my Canvas integration. And then here are some additional resources. So there's a really nice longer demo video for educators here. And this is a really great 1-minute short demo video for students if you want to show them how to do it. And then the Flipgrid blog also has a lot of resources. Although I noticed that a lot of resources and ideas are generated more towards like middle and high school students rather than college students. So you'll just have to see how much that's, to what extent that's useful. All right, so any questions about Flipgrid? Mitzi?
Do you think they would find it fun to do that, or wouldn't they, not just shy, the shy students, but would it just be cognitively like, you know, just sort of a pain to have to make a video? I don't know.
I mean, you're asking me to inspect the psyche of today's undergrads. I really don't know. I mean, I feel like TikTok is really popular, right? Which is like a whole video-based social media platform. But at the same time, maybe people like this for their personal fun life. But if it gets, imported into like an educational context, maybe they think it's just silly or something. I think depending on what your class is, if you have some ideas for it, you could just have them try it out maybe in the first week and then tell you, hey, yeah, that was fun, or oh my God, that was embarrassing and silly, and then just sort of, see how the students like it. The thing I really like about it is that it personalizes things so much more than if you just have people kind of writing to each other. So you just see people's faces and they seem maybe much more like a person if you see them on videos. But yeah, I don't know if the students appreciate that aspect of it necessarily. So it would probably be something that I would try out, but not plan to use it for the whole semester, and maybe have some alternatives if the students turn out to find it just silly or embarrassing or whatever. Any other questions? Okay, well, I mean, then this is basically all we got. One thing maybe to mention is that Zach and I have been trying to figure out how we can give you guys maybe some kind of certificate for attending these workshops, because sometimes that's nice maybe for like a job application dossier, because I think, people might find it useful to see that you actually went to a training about online teaching, or maybe you want to hang it on your wall in your office. So we still haven't quite figured out yet how at CU we actually access the place to find certificates like that. But we're looking into it. And so then maybe we'll just email those out to you. But yeah, if you want one, you can also email us and let us know. And we're going... Yeah, Mitzi?
They should definitely get credit for the graduate teaching certificate.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, that definitely gets counted. But we were thinking having like a piece of paper that says, hey, you did this, might be nice. Yeah, so, and as we said, we recorded all of this. So we're going to make the slides and the recordings available to everyone. So I'm going to share with you probably next week or so exactly where you can find all of that if you want to review it. So yeah, so I think I'm going to stop our recording.